Today our panel is concentrating on food and beverage, food, glorious food. Our two panellists today are Mr. Wayne Taranto, General Manager of the Sofitel here in Sydney, and Mr. Andreas Breitfuss, Head of Catering Hospitality Services at ANZ Stadium. I'm going to ask the gentlemen to introduce themselves in a few minutes, and maybe at the end of their introduction about their careers and where they are now, just a sentence or two about what makes them so passionate about food and beverage. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Mr. Wayne if he would please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Val, and thanks for the opportunity of speaking today. So I've been in the industry now for 24 years. Started when I was 10. No, just joking. I started my career literally after leaving school. I studied a hospitality and tourism diploma. At that time, it was called the Metropolitan Business College. So I was literally going to that course in the early hours of the morning through until lunchtime, and then I would go and work in the industry in the afternoon. That was a requirement of that particular diploma. I was fortunate to secure a role in an organisation called Bobby McGee's. That was an American-style concept. It was here in Sydney, in Darling Harbour, where the current Hard Rock restaurant is now. It also had sites in Canberra, and it had sites in Melbourne. That was a good introduction to the industry. It was very much like a production every day. It was a big theatre-style restaurant, character-style waiters. We had a very big lounge entertainment bar that at the time traded exceptionally well, and it was a good learning platform for me in terms of starting out in the industry. From there, once I reached it to a senior management level, I progressed and went into what was part of Amalgamated Holdings, which is now Ridges Hotels, and started my career in hotels and essentially progressed from a middle management role, so a duty manager position, worked across the various departments, rooms division, food and beverage, sales and marketing, before getting my first appointment as a general manager, and I progressed and then went on to manage 7 hotels up and down the east coast here of Australia, from urban style CBD hotels to resort style properties on a big scale, and was fortunate to manage all the Ridges hotels here in Sydney for a period of 2 years. At the end of that stint, I was given an opportunity with that same organisation to do a rebrand of what you would have known back then as Greater Union Cinemas. And I joined the exhibition business, and I did a 2-year project where I rebranded all of the event cinemas across the country, which was an exciting time for that particular organisation. We had a significant capital budget at a time where we were going through the GFC, so we were getting listened to when it came to builders and contractors, and we had an opportunity to create an all-encompassing environment for cinema goers. At the end of that project, I then was on a bit of time off, and I got an opportunity, at that time the COO, Simon McGrath of my current company, Accor Hotels, we caught up and an opportunity came up to join Accor at a time where, which is topical today, food and beverage was a focus for the organisation. And I've been with that organisation now for 5 years, and I've probably been fortunate to manage 3 of the best assets we have in Sydney, which is the Pullman Olympic Park Hotel out in the Olympic precinct where Andreas is, and I was there for 2.5 years. I then progressed to Pullman Quay Grand, which is here on Sydney Harbour, a beautiful property down at Circular Quay, and in this year I then moved to Sofitel Sydney. So I've been now with Accor for 5 years, and hope to continue with that organisation moving forward. And I think, what I'm most passionate about from a food and beverage point of view is it's such a dynamic, innovative part of our business. It's constantly evolving. We're exposed. I think reality TV has brought food and beverage to the forefront. We're now hearing more about it. Everyone's an expert, and it certainly keeps us in the industry on our toes because we continually need to improve, be consistent about what we do, and quality is absolutely key.
Thank you. Andreas.
Thanks, Val. So I'm probably close to nearly 3 decades in the hospitality industry. So I'm a third-generation hotelier and restaurateur in my family. So I literally started off, working in the restaurants and the kitchens from a very, very early age. So I think it's almost by osmosis that it's, made who I am today. Obviously, early part of my career in the industry was actually sporting aspirations. So once I'd sort of retired in my sporting field, hotels was always going to be where I was going to go into, and obviously went straight up to obviously the Blue Mountains International Hotel Management School. So I was one of the first groups to graduate out from there. And lucky and very similar to Wayne, I was then actually picked up by Ridges Hotels and Resorts and became a food and beverage manager for them in one of their bigger properties down in the Snowy Mountains. After the appointment through there, I travelled through Ridges a fair bit on some of their new acquisitions that they had up and down the eastern seaboard, which was basically just setting up their food and beverage areas along those hotels. Once I'd finished with Ridges, I was with them for about 4 or 5 years, then migrated actually back to the family businesses. At that point we had 3 hotels in the family, so I basically helped the family then run those 3 hotels and take them to some national awards, both in marketing, operations and different aspects. After retiring from my family business at a very young age, I sort of passed on the baton to my older brother to run the businesses for mum and dad. Then migrated through to my own consultancy firm. So basically I had a fairly strong consultancy firm here in Sydney, running through looking all those aspects of business development in the hospitality industry. So everything from a refurbished small cafe, everything up to looking at recruitment processes and sales and marketing and all those types of areas. Upon finishing there, actually one of my clients that I worked with, a large event business here in Sydney, Dalton House, I then became their group general manager, ran their quite very successful businesses, which was a fantastic opportunity to do. Moved further on after being there for about 3 years, into a position as the General Manager for Hospitality at a very boutique group of restaurants and hotels up in the Hunter Valley. Was Tower Estate, which include quite the gold standard Reliance Chateau property, Tower Lodge. So took that then to 3 World Hotel Awards, luxury hotel awards during that time I was with the organisation. And then finally fell into the position that I'm currently in now. So I'm the head of catering for Stadium Australia Group. Currently I lead a team of hospitality professionals through 13 entertainment venues throughout New South Wales. And the largest of that obviously being Sydney's Olympic Stadium, which is ANZ Stadium, which is kind of head office from where we are at the moment. Passions for me in food and beverage, certainly wine is one. Holding a belt in as a sommelier. I mean, I love the wine, I love the passion about that, and I certainly get involved. Even today, I still do a lot of aspects around the wine service within the businesses we're in. And very much like Wayne said, I think food and beverage is such a dynamic side of hospitality that is just moving in so many different directions and so quickly. So love to be in there amongst it all.
Thank you very much. So you can see we've got a vast amount of experience there, so it opens the questions up from maybe selling popcorn in a cinema to very high-end meals. Mike, I've got a couple of questions before we throw the floor open. I'm assuming that staffing is one of the major, if not the major problem that you have. Could you tell us how you go about how you tackle those problems? And if it isn't the major one, what is the major problem? So maybe Wayne first.
From a hotel industry perspective, I think there's so much growth. We've gone through a phase now where we're in high demand. The markets are strong in most of our capital cities, with a few exceptions. Probably Brisbane and Perth are struggling a little at the moment. But in terms of Sydney and Melbourne, there's growth, there's hotels being built. Accor have got 2 big hotels being built at the moment, new Sofitel next to the new convention centre here in Sydney. And we've got a property out at the airport, a Pullman, being built at the moment. So when it comes to food and beverage talent, it's about looking internally, first and foremost, to see what succession plans are in place and what potential we have within. And it's about finding the right positions for the right people. When we're growing, and we're growing quite quickly at the moment, it's about looking externally and seeing what talent's available to us, and ensuring once again that we're identifying the right talent and we're setting up the right career path for them to succeed within our business. And I think if I can elaborate that on a little bit further, Accor, we had an appointment of a new CEO and chairman based in Paris, so we have our head office based in Paris. We also have an office in Asia Pac. and we have one here based for the Pacific here in Sydney. And our CEO, Sebastian Barzin, for the first time ever, a CEO made a statement that food and beverage was in his top 5 priorities for the organisation. He did a lot of research and investment into food and beverage, and the one key thing that came from that research is that we need to identify the right talent. Food and beverage is we needed to unlock a bit of potential within a lot of our hotels, not only here in Australia, but globally. And as a consequence of that, we've now got a structure driving food and beverage within our business. So we've got a CEO based in Paris, and then we have what we call relays. So we have those responsibles in other regions that support that CEO in driving not only the structure, but the direction of food and beverage within our hotel organisation. So talent will always be a challenge. We're constantly looking for talent, both internally and externally. And as we grow, building that depth to take on these new acquisitions and these new hotels will be a real focus for us. So hotels are in demand, it's our time, and we need to make the most of that opportunity.
So loyalty is key to getting promotion?
Definitely.
Okay. Andreas?
Yeah, certainly from and our businesses are slightly different because we're event-based businesses. So for us, we have a massive game day as an example. So ANZ Stadium, obviously we host the NRL Grand Finals. So we literally have to, just in food and beverage alone, find 2,000 staff just to staff the catering side of the business. So for us, and we've certainly seen some, movements in the market now. So we have, Barangaroo developments now opening up over the next, 4 or 5 years. We have the new convention centre coming online. So we really see that there's actually going to be a bit of a skills gap or a skills shortage throughout, certainly the food and beverage side of the business. So for us, we're starting to now putting some strategies in place to actually commandeer that. Very much like Wayne does as well. We try and look internal. So for all of our full-time employees, we have some very, very strong training programs and likewise, recruitment processes as well. So,
okay. Well, that's staffing. What would be your second biggest challenge? You've got the right staff now. Now, what's the next?
I think the challenge for us and the Stadia environment is always been a very static. It hasn't moved very much in 10 years. And I think what we've found over certainly the last 2 years is to be innovative in a stadium environment. So and part of the development that we've been doing over the last 2 years is we're trying to create where it's the bars or restaurants within the stadium. It's almost like if I was sitting here in the city at a corner pub having a beer and a burger, well, that should be identical to what you should be able to get out at the stadium. And we've now changed, certainly the thoughts and the processes on how we actually then deliver that. So for us, just in the last, 12 months, we've poured over in nearly $4 million worth of development into new bars, new restaurants, new innovative type of developments in the food and beverage area. So for me, that's where a lot of my focus has actually been, over the last 2 years.
Okay, Wayne.
Probably the second biggest challenge for us would be making hotel dining popular again. I think there was a period of time within this country where you would go to a hotel for a dining experience. Over a period of time, we're encountered with some great independents who are doing some amazing things. You just look at the likes of Justin Hems and the Maryvale Group, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Constantly evolving, constantly coming up with new concepts, keeping it fresh and alive. And within hotels, we've somewhat come too standardised and too systematic. And I think one of the key takeouts I took a few weeks ago from a conference we had where our CEO spoke, he said we need to move away from systems and standards and we need to take some risks and we need to look at some marquee type opportunities where we can create some restaurant experiences to get people and our guests an opportunity to come back to hotels. Because if we look at Asia, you go to a hotel for a great dining experience. And I think we've started that trend somewhat here, particularly in Sydney. You look at the likes of Four Seasons, you've got a reputable chef there, Mark Best doing Pay Modern. We've got Luke Mangan in Glass Restaurant at Hilton. We've got Rob Marchetti, who's a well-known restaurateur, who's in the Gowings Bar and Grill as part of QT Hotels. So I think we're now starting a trend of getting people back into hotels for a good dining experience or a good bar experience. So our challenge moving forward is to keep up to that pace and keeping consistent.
If I can just share a small story with you. I started in hotels in Australia a little bit before these gentlemen, and when when you stayed at a hotel, you automatically got breakfast, and the food and beverage department just got $1 or so from the room rate to cover the food cost. That was what they got. And now I would suggest, I'll ask Wayne this question now, probably breakfast is one of his most profitable meals.
It is. Yeah. Obviously, that's where the volume is.
Yes.
Most in-house guests, we capture them for breakfast. And it depends on location as to whether you open or trade for lunch, depending on surrounds and kind of, if you looked at the Sofitel Sydney, we don't trade our restaurant at lunchtime. We've got a lobby bar which we open for lunchtime. We're in pretty good company. You know, we've got some of the best restaurants in Sydney surrounding our hotel. So you've got to ensure that you've got the right product to go out to market with if you're going to trade as an all-day dining restaurant. But definitely, and further to your point, I think breakfast will always be profitable. You know, we'll average anywhere from 400 to 500 covers a day, and that's consistent. And dinner is really dependent on what mix of business you've got in the hotel.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from the floor, Mr. Frawley.
Just going back to what your question was before, or what you mentioned before when you were talking about the restaurants. Each restaurant, you mentioned a celebrity chef, whether it was Luke Mangan, Robert Marchetti, or Mark Best. How important has their influence been, and how can you as a restaurant group, or what's your intention? Do you intend on getting a celebrity chef, and how are you going to leverage off that?
Good question. There's a couple of schools of thought. We've got some great local chefs across our group who have got very good capability, drive very good quality, and understand how to operate within a hotel environment. When you go out and you source a celebrity chef, they will certainly bring in the capture. They'll drive the covers into your particular outlet, but it's them understanding that they're operating within a hotel environment, which is very different to a standalone environment. So in key marquee locations, so, you know, in sites such as, you know, potentially the new Sofitel Sydney, which will complement the new convention centre, there would be a consideration to engage a high-profile chef, not necessarily a celebrity chef, to support us with menu direction, mentoring the chefs, and providing some scope around what that restaurant concept looks like. Will they work in their day-to-day? Potentially not, but certainly when you attach a name to a brand, it has an instant impact. And we've seen that with the Pullman brand. We engaged Justin North, who was a well-known restaurateur and chef here within Sydney. Once we started utilising his services to design menus, support our teams, do roadshows around our various Pullmans around the country, we did see an increase in capture, particularly in the restaurants.
Thank you. Andreas, maybe have you, or are you considering, like the airlines, having menus styled or by a particular chef, or are you happy with what you're doing?
No, the short answer is no. But where we are now moving towards is actually having brand identification. So as an example, and a great example of this one is actually the Adelaide Oval, where they have the Hill of Grace restaurant now. So It's been co-branded with a very prominent wine brand. So we're looking certainly in the next series of developments we're doing throughout the main stadium is same type of brand likeness and basically joint ventures with. So it has a bit of brand identity sitting behind it.
Leveraging off a name.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got one more question for you both. We've been in a very highly technical age, and waste has always been a very big issue in restaurants, and I'm certainly, you could probably relate some stories about massive amounts of waste in a stadium situation. How have you seen technology? Where's that helped you the most? Maybe Andreas first. In terms of ovens and what other things you might be using.
Yeah, technology, it's certainly a big part. And as an example, you know, we obviously, the amount of beer that we actually pull through the stadium, you know, we have about 288 beer fonts throughout the stadium. Just to fill the beer lines alone, that's 45 kegs of beer. So it's well over $30,000 worth of beer sitting in the beer lines before we pull the first beer off. Now, even though the stadium is now, you know, well over, 15 years old, we're now starting to employ some of those technologies. How do we actually get that beer out of the line and still be within our safe comfort zone with regards to things like food safety and not being able to, leave beer in the lines. So, and technology plays the most important part in that aspect for us to actually recover, that extra, 45, kegs worth of beer.
Or some volunteers to drink it at the end.
Yes, I've had plenty of people ask if they can come in and have a after event party, but probably won't happen on my watch.
Wayne, any comments on technology?
Within hotels, it plays an important part. like any industry, similar to like the experiences in events and catering. I think it's certainly improved productivity for our teams, but it also improves our service efficiencies. I think I mentioned earlier that as an industry we're exposed, there's higher expectations on service delivery, and I think technologies allow us to do things a lot more quickly and a lot more efficiently, and that's the expectation of our guests. You know, they're exposed when they go through airports, they can do self-check-ins, their bags now go automatically onto aircrafts, and that process has become a lot more seamless. And I think that now filters through, certainly in the hotel environment, of what guests expect. No longer do they want to see queues or you know, any issues when it comes to that manual process that we've experienced in the past. So it's about speed.
Okay, thank you. I've got one more question, then would you please start thinking about your questions? I'm going to throw it open to the floor. Particularly you, Andreas, you're serving anything from a $5 pie, $5 bowl of chips to, I presume, $100, $200 plates of food. Can you tell us what some of the complexities are about having that whole range of food, getting it right for each different level?
Yeah, and level's a great answer, or part of that answer, and the way that I look at, you know, the big operations that we do, such as ANZ Stadium, I kind of look at like a 747 aircraft. You know, at the bottom end we have our normal economy class, we then go up to premium economy, we then have business class, and then we have first class. So we have to be able to match the service and quality at each one of those levels, and logistics plays a very big part for us, you know, certainly in that area. So as an example, on the grand final day, which is our biggest day of the year, we will serve 8,500 plated meals in the corporate areas throughout the building. You know, we have 79 satellite kitchens throughout the building and 3 production kitchens producing that food out. So for us, the logistical part of actually putting that together, and it all comes back down to the original planning that we probably do around about 6 months in advance of those big games. So
at the bottom end price? A pie?
Yeah, a pie now is, you know, around about $5 for a pie.
And
you know,
the very top end, what, on that day, what would have been your? So
we serve a beautiful, you know, 5-course degustation menu with matched wines in our arena restaurant, you know, at $150 per person. So
right.
So you've really got a large range, and like I said before, we've got to match the product and the service. So I have to have, you know, high quality wine sommeliers up there, you know, decanting wine, as opposed to just someone pouring a beer down for the normal punter down in the retail outlets. So
big challenge.
Very big challenge.
Wayne, you've had multiple operations under one roof. Challenges?
Yeah, listen, I think the complexities in a hotel environment, you know, if I looked at Sofitel Sydney, it has 14 meeting rooms, and we can have those all operating simultaneously. We can have our ballroom, which can cater up to 600 guests at a time. Then we've got our outlets, so we've got our main restaurant, Garden Court, we've got Soiree, which is our bar, and then depending on the mix of business in the hotel, you can have room service operating as well. So you've got, similar to the stadium, we've got a production kitchen, we've got banquet kitchens. We're fortunate to have pastry kitchen doing all of our pastries and desserts. So it's about the leadership in those key areas, ensuring that those leaders are all communicating when we're providing a lot of meals, certainly not to the scale of ANZ, but still a lot of volume at all different scales, from buffets to a la carte meals to room service style meals, and then just general beverages in our bar, and making sure that those leaders are ensuring the efficiencies within each of those outlets, and we're providing the level of service that clients are paying for. And in the market as it stands today, they are paying a premium to either conference or stay within a hotel environment. So,
okay. Who would like to ask the first question? Hands up. Okay. I was actually trying to get the microphone to them, so while I ask.
I've got the microphone. I'm quite happy to hold it for a while. Sorry. To go back to your thing about technology, and you were talking about wastage. And sustainability is a big issue, and wastage. You know, we know that if we can reduce costs, it's a better way of improving our profit and so forth. In terms of sustainability and food and beverage, what areas have both of you had to consider implementing, and what have you implemented in order to reduce, say, or to make you a more sustainable business? Probably Andreas first, if you don't mind.
Good question, Tom. So for us, we actually hire an external consultant, so we use a closed loop program. So for us, it was actually part of our KPIs or our organisational goals at the start of the year was actually to reduce our waste within the building. And, literally it's hundreds worth of, tonnes of rubbish that actually come out of the stadium. So for us, there was a big focus on the year. And I think we started off at the year with around about 40% of all of our waste being recycled coming out. And we've now flipped that around to 60% of all of our waste now is recycled out of the building. So for us, it's an important part because that then becomes, a profitable part. So everything from what we now serve some of our meals on, it's actually recyclable bamboo plates, as an example, rather than a polystyrene plate. So it's all those natural type products, everything from the knives and the forks and, plastics out, and wood and bamboo are basically in. So we've tried to assimilate that across as many areas throughout the whole building as we can.
For a core, we have a program called Planet 21, which is a global program. We operate across all of our hotels, and essentially there's a number of different status levels from bronze through up until platinum. And it's a requirement each year that you increase your status until you achieve platinum. It's about energy conservation, it's about waste management. For food in particular, which is relevant to today, we also engage a company based out of Singapore. And in each of our kitchens, we actually use similar to an iPad, a tablet. So all of our food waste is measured each day. And it's a 2-tap process on a tablet, and a chef just identifies what ingredient that they're putting through the bin, and we actually measure that. And that obviously helps improve our costs, but at the same time gets us an understanding of what our waste looks like on a daily, weekly and monthly basis. And this Planet 21 program has been now in the business for over 10 years. And as of today, all of the properties within Australia have achieved gold status. And there's probably a few properties currently now that have achieved platinum. And I'd suspect within the next 2 years, most properties will be platinum status. So, and it's important. Our clients are wanting to know what our sustainability practices are. And they're now asking those questions, whereas probably 5-10 years ago, they never asked. So it is certainly a big focus.
The Lura's got in first, ladies and gentlemen, and this is from Jess. Thank you very much, Jess. And this is directed to Wayne. We see a lot of F&B directors transitioning to general managers. What are some of the key skills that a person may acquire working in F&B which are transferable to running a hotel? I'll also ask you.
Yeah, from a food and beverage perspective, there was a decision made by our COO, Simon, about 5 years ago, around the time that I started with the core, that in order to progress to a general manager position, you needed to have worked in food and beverage. That wasn't the case in the past, and that was that we were taking food and beverage seriously, and that's been a significant step forward because traditionally a general manager in a hotel came from a rooms or a sales and marketing background, and I'm sure Andreas will support that. However, it's okay that you can have the room side of the business where it needs to be and highly profitable, and the reality is it produces 70% of our overall profit. But the food and beverage experience certainly creates that all-rounded or overall experience. And now guests are looking for that all experience or overall experience when they stay in a hotel. And if one element's missing, they'll make a decision as whether they return and be loyal to that particular hotel. So when it comes to identifying talent and looking for potential, we know our best general managers, and I say this because I came from a food and beverage background, generally have had their time in food and beverage, understand that element, and you'll generally see that their profitability or their gross operating profit in that hotel is much higher based on having that skill set.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with everything that Wayne sort of said in that part, and I think what's important too is the food and beverage is such a dynamic and cost-sensitive part of the business. When we talk about we've got our wage costs, we've got our food cost and beverage cost on top of that, and then our operational overhead cost to it. So as to design yourself into a great manager or into a GM, I think you need to understand those dynamics ultimately. And I think what I've seen in the industry so far is that a lot of the restaurants within hotels are actually business units within the hotel. So the food and beverage side of the business has to be profitable, and it has to maintain those industry standards when it comes to food costs and beverage costs, and then also profitability percentages. So
just a quick question to you. You talk about food cost. What's the difference between your food costs for pies and chips as opposed to your $150 meals percentage-wise?
Percentage-wise, it's interesting, and in some part, there's some parts, and if we took a meat pie as an example, we actually have a really high food cost on a meat pie,
yes,
because there's a certain amount of you can actually charge. So if we did the regular, sub 30% food cost for a meat pie, every time you come to the stadium, we're probably going to have to charge you $8 or $9 for a pie. Now that's outside of what the market would bear, so we actually back that back. So I think we're sitting around about 42% as our cost of sales on a pie, as an example, as opposed to, and where we get some of our cream on the crop then is some of those high-end dinners and high-end food and beverage offerings. Then we can actually get the right margins out of it as we need to. So,
would you have a comment on those
if I could
variances?
just add, I think with the focus on having expertise and skill set within food and beverage, we've seen that we've got some hotels within Australia where the profit contribution is now evenly balanced between rooms and food and beverage. And that wasn't the case in the past. So that just goes to show that food and beverage can play as an important part as rooms moving forward.
Another question I meant to ask you before, you talked about waste and recycling, etc., but when they've had terrible weather and you expect a lot of people, you must have some horrific stories about waste that you just couldn't avoid because of lack of numbers.
Yes and no, and it all depends how closely, and because we're an events-based business, how closely after an event we have another event. Because obviously, as an example, if we had an event 2 days after grand final, then I can keep all the beer in the line and I can keep reusing what was actually in those lines, and we're not actually having to waste that type of information. But what is important in the process is, yes, if it's a bad weather day, and some great examples is Easter of this year.
Right.
There was torrential rain throughout the whole weekend. It was usually a gangbuster weekend worth of business, and we probably got only about half to 3/4 of the numbers actually walking through the door. So absolutely, but one of the great things about what's happening now in the stadium arena is that we get fresh produce in. So as an example, we'll go back to the meat pie example. Every meat pie that you actually have in the stadium is actually made fresh the day before by our supplier, because we're on such good terms and such great relationships with them. All those pies then will actually go back to the supplier at the end of the day. Still, if there's a full box of pies still go back because they're made fresh, they still have a holding life then basically of another 6 weeks, so to speak. So we have those types of relationships that we can actually move that product in and out of the business.
All right. This is sort of around this. You've partly answered this one. This is from James on Twitter. When hosting a big game, how much lead time do you usually have, and how much in advance are all the details finalised?
So if I'll go back to grand final because that's the best example out of grand final. So we'll know the calendar dates over 12 months in advance, so we get a good idea of what events we actually have coming throughout the year. In terms of the planning process, I will probably start, and that's probably one of the major parts of my role, is I'll start that planning around about 6 months in advance, and that comes through from looking at what the event was from the previous year, developing. We have a unique planning process we need to go through to make sure we've ticked all the boxes all the way through the planning process. So for me, it's around about 6 months in advance. When we look about getting the food and beverage organised within the building, grand final, we'll start setting grand final around about 9 to 10 days prior. So all of the rooms, all of the infrastructure, all the bars, everything basically starts to get set around about 10 days prior.
Anything to share on event planning or food and beverage?
Probably just on the event cinema side. That was kind of a unique environment, having come from restaurants and hotels into a cinema environment, just the sheer volume. And most of you wouldn't know that, obviously the food and beverage is probably the most profitable part of that business. Most of when you go out and buy a ticket to the cinema, 75% of that goes to the producer of the film. So the majority of the profit comes in food and beverage, and high volume, high turnover, and certainly when it's blockbuster season, like we're about to go in at the moment, that's premium time for a cinema. And if you didn't realise, those choc tops that you all love and adore and you have every time you go to a cinema, they're actually all made in-house, unbelievably. So you've got specific staff employed just to make choc tops, and that was a real eye-opener for me, because I would have thought you'd buy them in. But we've got some employees within that business that, in an 8-hour shift can make over 800 choc tops, which I thought was extraordinary. And they taste great every time. So, but yeah, it's certainly different scales, but high. It's high revenue earner for that particular business at a fairly low cost when you look at items like popcorn and choc tops, etc.
I certainly learned a couple of things. That's the most surprising, I think.
Absolutely.
The question for you both. This is from Amber. Thank you, Amber, on Twitter. What are some of the key changes in trends within food and beverage that you have observed during the span of your careers, and where do you think we're headed? Maybe start with Andreas.
I think technology plays the key role in that. So certainly, 15, 20 years ago, point of sale was sort of just creeping in. And that's the computerized version of point of sale. And now we go looking into the future now, and there's companies like Google, and Google have their Google glasses now, which technically, in the future, as a food and beverage attendant, or even as a rooms, attendant in a hotel, you're about to wear those glasses, and then it'll automatically have that face recognition of your guest as they're arriving. So every single person within the restaurant will have a pair of these glasses on. They'll be able to recognise that it's Mr. Jones, and Mr. Jones last time actually had a glass of Chardonnay. So they already know by the time they walk up to the table to serve Mr. Jones, they already know what his likes are. So the technology movement in what we're actually going to see over the next 10 years will start heading down that road. So yeah, so certainly for me, the technology part is going to be the biggest movement.
I think the pop-up experience, which we're now seeing a lot more of. You'll see Heston Blumenthal recently opened up the Fat Duck for a 6-month pop-up restaurant within Melbourne. Highly successful, really hard to get a seat within that restaurant. He's now created another pop-up called Dining, which I see will take off for another six-month period. We're now starting to experiment with pop-ups within hotels, be it from a bar, be it from a food offering, be it a cafe offering. And I think there's a big future in pop-ups because we like something that's new, it's unique, it's different. It only lasts for a short period of time, so there's that level of excitement around I've got to experience it. And I see that there will be that will evolve over a period of time. And I think restaurants potentially won't move around their location, but will certainly change their concepts more regularly. And I mentioned earlier Maryvale and certainly Justin Hems, what he's done with Ivy. There's that restaurant on the base ground that he's changed over 3 times within a short period of time. And each time he continually gets that interest, he goes out to market with that concept, and it's successful and it works, and people keep coming back. And I think pop-ups, there's certainly a place for them. They're exciting, they're different, and I think they're very much innovative in most locations.
Are they the Ubers of food and beverage?
Potentially.
Question from the floor here, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Louise, Director of Marketing at the school.
Hi, thanks, gentlemen. Andreas, in the challenge to get audiences to ANZ Stadium and I guess any other events, cinemas, etc., what part does food play in that strategy to attract people to attend events?
Certainly in the past, it didn't play a very big part in the process, and I think we're now, moving into those reams of guest experience. So it's the end-to-end experience that the guest actually has. So it's literally the time that they jump on the train here in the city, travel out through to Sydney Olympic Park, get off, experience everything around, the hotels, for example, at the Pullman and the Novotel, how they experience that part, and then as they move into the stadium. So what we've been trying to do, and part of the process is a lot of things that we're doing in the stadium there, is providing, okay, what's the extra experience? So yep, they're coming here to watch a football game. How can we actually value add that with food, with beverage, with service, giving them a unique experience that they won't be able to get at any other sporting venues? So that's where a lot of our focus has been of late, and probably one of the greatest examples of that we've implemented probably in the last 12 months is our premium wine service. So as a member of the stadium, you can come into any one of our members' restaurants or corporate areas, so the suites or the boxes. We have a premium wine list, so we're talking about wines, plus $200 per bottle. As soon as you order that wine, you actually then choose which decanter you actually want that wine decanted into. So we have a range of, Riedel decanters. We have 9 of them on the property, all different in size and shape and design. And then you'll actually have that wine served to you by a sommelier, which has gone through our sommelier training course. And then the wine will be served into the varietal glassware. So if you've ordered Shiraz, a bottle of Grange as an example, you'll get that bottle of Grange served into a beautiful crystal decanter and then into the varietal glassware. So for us, it was about the experience for that guest. So they'll come out of that going, you know what, I didn't expect to get my wine decanted in a stadium environment while I'm watching the football. So
I'm used to beer and meat pies.
Yeah, okay, well, we can change that. We can change that. So
At a cost.
Yeah. And I think having worked in the Olympic Park precinct and being part of that journey of changing the perception of event goers going to particularly the stadium and Allphones Arena, and I think one thing that Olympic Park precinct have done exceptionally well is activating the park, theming it in accordance with whatever the event be it State of Origin, NRL Grand Final. It's become highly digital in terms of the imagery that you see as you walk that path to the stadium, through lighting, and it's all about the atmosphere. And I think the food and beverage offering complements that activation. And, the park's come a long way from where it was 10 years ago or even further back when the Olympics was in town. And we're now giving people a reason to go out to ANZ Stadium, whereas in the past they saw it as a distance away and why do we have to travel that far? Now it's a worthwhile place to go.
Okay. I've got another question. I assume or presume that you run surveys from time to time amongst your customers. A graduate of the school, his father was head of Spotless Catering in Melbourne. And he used to relate the stories to me about how they used to do surveys all the time. And it'd be, you haven't got enough salads and there's too many chips and too many pies and you need to have this. And then they'd put waves of salad sandwiches and salads and feta cheese and all these things. And what did they run out of every time? Chips and pies, because there weren't enough chips and pies. So how true are your surveys? I mean, how do you react to your surveys, I suppose, is my question.
With moderation.
Yes.
With moderation. And you're exactly right, and everyone has to understand that, in an event, in an event environment, people are going there to the footy. When they go to the footy, they're going to have a beer and they want to have a meat pie. That's never going to change. However, we will have those guests who will want actually a little bit of better experience than that. I think, and what we'll find, certainly in a food and beverage sense, is you'll see that layer or that middle layer of quality of food and beverage now going to the next level, and that's what we've been developing over the last 12 months. It's not just the meat pie now; it's actually a little bit more like the pub food. So whatever you get in the corner pub here in the city is the type of food that we'll actually start serving there as well. So. But yeah, you'll
actually created a third level for you, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guest feedback in our business is critical. We measure our guest satisfaction through Net Promoter Score, which is essentially a score out of 1 to 100. We send surveys to every guest that stays in our hotels, and it's something that we monitor daily, and it's something that we're measured on, certainly the leadership team. And we've got a program which we rolled out 3 years ago, which was instigated by Simon McGrath, our COO, called Peopleology. And there's 7 key principles that sit behind that program. And it's about giving our teams autonomy to go out and provide services over and above what's expected. And I think I mentioned earlier that we're exposed as an industry. We're exposed to online reviews, probably like no other industry. So we're very much obsessive about that guest experience, and it's all about improvements, and food and beverage plays a big part, because if we don't have that all-rounded experience, our guests won't remain loyal and they'll choose one of our competitors. So it's really quite that simple.
Floor. Thank you very much. We'll just get the microphone. Don't worry, we'll get round to it. Somebody had to be the first one. The floodgates open now traditionally. Your name is?
Wendy.
Wendy, thank you very much.
So you said to get to the general manager position, you have to have worked in food and beverage. Does that mean you have to have worked there in a supervisory role, or just you have to have worked there at some point in your career?
I think having exposure, it's good to have got to a senior position within food and beverage, a leadership role, where you've got a good understanding of all facets of the hotel, having communicated with other leaders within the business, such as rooms division, sales and marketing and finance. And I think why it's important is because we're entering into a real dynamic phase of hotels. Food and beverage outlets are becoming more extensive. They're becoming more about the experience. And if we're to get a reputation of having great hotel dining experiences, we need to have the right calibre of general managers to drive that. We can go out and engage external consultants, celebrity chefs and all the expertise in the industry, but if we don't have the right people managing it day to day, we won't be successful moving forward. So that's why it's a critical element that our general managers have a passion for food and beverage and understand it in order to manage it day to day.
Would you make a comment on that? Or?
Very,
have to.
yeah, no, very similar. So.
If I could just share something, I think that what I've noticed over the years, it certainly used to be in Europe that you had to have a food and beverage background. In fact, a lot of chefs were making it to general manager. In America and Australia, it seemed to be more the profit that was made in rooms. The general manager was driven by rooms division managers. But I see that now changing here in Australia, that food and beverage managers, for the reasons that you've both spoken about, are now getting more chances to head the ship. Yes, sir. Your name is?
My name is Bao.
Bao.
Yes.
Thank you. What is your question?
First, I want to thank you two for coming today. And my question is that what is your approach towards younger customers? Because we are influenced by fast food industry and even the technology. We don't pay much attention to fine dining as much as the previous generations.
I think the question is, how are you attracting the next generation of the fine diners when they go through the levels?
Good question. I wish I knew the real answer to it, then I would certainly all be rich.
Well, what would attract you? Sorry, I'll interrupt. What would attract you? You're the young person. What would you like to see?
But I don't feel very comfortable going to a fine dining restaurant myself.
Okay.
But maybe on a date, but not.
Yeah.
Because
It's okay. I didn't wish to embarrass you. So
I think
Go in.
for this one, I think price point is important. It's got to be affordable. And it's got to be an offering that appeals to you, I agree. Not all, fine dining is not for everyone. So that's when I referred earlier to concept. We've got to keep the concepts fresh and alive and constantly evolving. And I think we need to be socially aware, because that social media is driving and influencing the younger generation in everything they do. We've implemented in our business, which a lot of guests are not aware at this point in time. We've engaged a company called Local Measure. And that particular company, every time someone highlights that they're in our hotels and posts something on Facebook or through Instagram or various media channels, and it's about what they're doing at that time, be it celebrating an anniversary, a birthday, or they're with friends, I receive, as general manager, that post, as long as they're on the public domain. And that allows me to spontaneously react to that. So if there's guests in the hotel that have checked in on Facebook to say we're celebrating our anniversary, I can spontaneously identify who they are and send them a bottle of champagne saying congratulations on your anniversary. And the response to that has been remarkable. There's a bit of shock initially, but the response to that is quite amazing. So that's the technology piece where I get those prompts. And it could not necessarily be for a positive reason, it could be for a negative reason. They're not satisfied with their room and they're communicating to all their friends that they've been allocated a room that they're not happy with. So we can spontaneously resolve that without them having to come to reception to advise us. So there's a few key elements, but I think, yes, certainly that social awareness and that ability to have an offer that appeals to a variety of different demographics, not just the youth, but the older generation as well.
I've asked Bao, but maybe I could throw it open to the floor. So you go to trendy bars and trendy restaurants. Would a few of you put your hand up and say, what is it that attracts you to somewhere rather than somewhere else? And these gentlemen are helping you, maybe you can help them. Ambience. So when you say, we know what ambience is, but modern or?
Like modern, and it should go with the food, like how the presentation of the food goes to the whole environment.
Okay, we'll just start again. So it's ambience. Okay, you've very good answer.
Ambience of the restaurant.
Right.
And probably also the property. It should go well with the presentation of the food.
Okay. Do you have an example you could share with us?
Well, one of my favorite restaurants in the Philippines, it's Spiral. It's one of the Sofitel properties. It's fine dining as well, and their presentation, and because it's a French restaurant. I like the, talking about the five senses. Like everything should be particularly probably well planned. Like you have to know. I like the smell of, when you come into the whole property, it smells nice. The decor is really, it's grand, it's beautiful. And the presentation of the food, the service, how each staff talks to you. I think it's very important, particularly in people like us who are very enthusiastic about this industry.
Okay, that's fine, Dining. Would anybody care to share a bar experience or faster food experience with us? Okay, so what makes you go out? You'll all go out this weekend. You'll make a decision to go.
Depends upon the different types of products and the pricing.
Pricing?
And maybe occasions also.
Okay.
Sometimes.
Okay, so location's important.
Like casual gathering or any celebration. That's why we go out to like fast foods more.
Okay. Questions for these gentlemen? We've got them here. We've got them trapped for another 40 minutes or 30 minutes or so.
I'll just.
Oh,
add-
yeah, sorry.
add to that comment. I'll just add to what we're just talking about there, and I think it comes back to the analogy, certainly for in our business, is we look at it like a 747 aircraft, and we have to know our customers in each different area. So you can come to the stadium, or come to one of our venues, and you can get a meat pie, or you can go up, as we've just finished a couple of developments of bars, and part of that research out of developing those bars was we knew that our business customers, they wanted a large range of craft beers, and that's the beer is the hero type process in there. So we wanted to make sure we had a lot of craft beers. They wanted quick and easy food, which was not expensive, but they could literally take it, drink it with their beer, and head to their seats. So we've developed the bar in around that concept. So if you walk into the new bar, which is the Crossbar, it's all about the beer. So as soon as you walk in there, there's big, beautiful, gold fonts everywhere, with lots of craft beer everywhere, and then the food element is still sitting in the back, but it's a less so than what the beer aspects is about that bar. So it's matching to what your customers actually want. So I think which is a big part, which in turn comes back to the research on how you actually develop those areas.
Okay. Ms. Rika Presby, one of our lecturers here at the school, has a question.
From an educator's point of view, it's very interesting what you were saying, Wayne, before about moving away from systems and processes and being a bit different and offering a dining experience which is different. Our research and our discussions with the restaurant industry is that they don't like hiring hotel management students. And the reason that they're saying that is because they're not creative. They follow systems, they follow procedure, they follow processes. If you're saying that that is a change in the hotel industry, how do we as educators help you to create better employees that you're currently looking for and you might be looking for in the future?
Yeah, I think standards are important. So if I put it in some context, standards are important. We need to follow those standards. But sometimes standards prohibit us from making progress. And I'll give you an example, and it was something that was discussed in great depth a few weeks ago at a global conference in Bangkok, was if a standard doesn't make sense within the business and it's location specific, should it be a global standard or should it be a local standard? And a lot were challenged, and we were successful with quite a few. And one I'll raise, which is around wine, which is close to Andreas's heart, is that we had a global standard for Sofitel whereby every lobby bar within every Sofitel hotel had to list 100 wines by the bottle. Does that make sense from a cost perspective? No, it doesn't. Is there some demand in some of our key locations? Yes, there are. But across the board, no, there wasn't. So we made a decision to change that standard. So we're progressively now working through some of those key standards to say what was defined 10 years ago, is it relevant today? So when it comes to educating the industry on the direction that we're going, we need to ensure that, you're right, from an education point of view, that whilst the systems and the standards and the theory side is important, where we get challenged in the hotels, and I'm sure from the catering side, is that ability to deliver practically on the floor and having that ability to engage with our guests. Because our guests are quite a mixed demographic. They're youthful, they're the middle-aged, they're the elderly, and they all want to have a conversation. They all want to share their reason why they're staying with us or the reason why they're going out to ANZ Stadium. So the key thing for me and what I look for when I recruit industry people is their ability to engage and have a conversation. You can have all the theory and all of the knowledge in the world, but if you don't know how to engage and you don't have a level of confidence, you'll really struggle when you get to the coalface when you're dealing with guests. Some will challenge, some will be pleasant. It's a real mix, and I'm sure you experience it in the event and catering side as well.
Yes, I mean, I say it's process over service. You have to have the process, but you've got to provide the service. It's that balance of how you get it right. Did you have another question, or are you happy with it?
Only that technology seems to, and we've been discussing this in our classrooms, and one of our students made a good point today in talking about the students themselves, young people, this age group, communicate so much more on online, through Facebook, through Twitter and so forth. And we were talking about engaging them in different ways, and getting them to be comfortable, as you say, in approaching a person and actually having a conversation. Stop using those devices that we're so familiar with and really start talking to people and being more confident in those conversations, even like going to an event that we're part of and actually going up to someone and saying, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, and where are you from?" and start getting them engaged in that way. And that's something that we're very conscious of, trying to do that with our students here.
Internally, if you looked at in a hotel environment, you're exactly right. We've lost our ability to pick up the phone and actually go to someone's office because we'll just send an email. And it could be the most, simplest of requests or questions. And we've kind of enforced some rules just amongst my leadership team that when we have a meeting, it's phones in the middle. And essentially because everyone can't, prevent themselves from checking that email when it comes through or a message that's coming through. So I think there's some disciplines within the business that you've got to apply. We're constantly encouraging that amongst our teams. We understand that they want to check their Facebook accounts and Twitter accounts and Instagram and Snapchat and all of the like, but there's a time and place to do that, and it's about giving them the opportunity to do that through their work time during breaks, but understand that, whilst they're on the floor and working, that's their priority.
Yeah, I think if there's a meeting, that's the important thing, and unless they're going to save the world, they shouldn't be answering the phone. End of the story.
And I, to be honest, I do it with my own friends. We've now got a rule: if we go out with a group of, 5 or so friends, the rule is now that we all put our phones in the middle, and the first person to check their phone pays for dinner.
Dr. Scott Richardson, Head of School and Dean of Studies.
So these questions are actually coming through from the Lura campus on the live YouTube. So we've got quite a few here from our Year 1 students up there. The first one is asking how many hotels or companies have you worked for, or different brands, and do you believe that employees should stay loyal to the same brand, or should they explore around a bit once they graduate?
Well, myself, I've worked for now 5 brands, 4 of which were in a core, and 1 or 2 if you consider Event Cinemas as a brand, which it rightfully is. And I'd worked for that organisation for 19 years. I knew one culture, one management style, one way of operating. And for me, joining a core was kind of a different approach on a probably a more global scale. And I saw in Ridges Hotels, as an example, we would secure probably up to 5 hotels a year, new hotels or new acquisitions. Within a core, we secure 5 a week. and that dynamic was a big shift for me. But it just goes to show the size of the group and the opportunities to join a core and to move within other zones. So work in Asia or work in Europe was appealing to me.
Certainly from my part, and a lot of the goals of the students are to become general managers, and I think to become a general manager, you need to experience, different locations, different areas, different brands, different, departments. So I think that's an important part of career, progression all the way through. Certainly for me, so I've gone through, 6 brands or 6 different types of businesses in able to get, it just so happens that I've landed back into food and beverage land again. So for me, I think that's an important progression that you need to go through.
Yeah, working in one place is training, working in 2 places is experience. So I think there needs to be a level of brand loyalty, and there also needs to be a measure of you growing so as you're valuable to the next employer or the next position you might attempt to get. The floor here. I thought it was with this lady here, we will come back to you. Thank you. No, Scott, sorry. Just tell us your name, please.
Hello, my name is Laura.
Clara.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I have a question for you. What do you do to create different experience for a customer when coming to your restaurant? Because I think that as a human nature, people tend to look for new experience. So, beside food, if I know everything about your restaurant, I've been so many times in your restaurant, and some of my friends recommend me to offer me to go to your restaurant for a meeting or something, and I just feel so boring because I know everything. So what can you do?
Well, I think if I can just interrupt for a moment, I think Mr. Breitfuss, Andreas, partly mentioned it in his case where they decant the wine and use different glasses. So that's, although you might know what wine you're getting, it was actually another new and fresh experience you got, but you may have another example.
And I think also, the experiences don't just sit with the service side as well. So it's being innovative within your wine menus. It's being innovative within your food menus. So people just aren't going there for one element. It's about that total experience. So for us, it's an evolving process. So we won't set a menu in one of our, as an example, in our 5-star restaurant. We'll keep developing that menu throughout the year. So we'll probably change the menu 4 or 5 times throughout that whole process. So as a guest, returning back to that restaurant, you'll always have a different experience at some part, whether it's better wines on the menu, whether it's better food, whether it's new employees, a different service style. So it's always in that development stage all the way through. So we've never sort of set it and forget it, and we're happy with it. We're always trying to push that boundary out a little bit further.
And it's a balance because you'll have a menu and people come, and you change it, and they come, oh, where's that dish gone? I came here especially for it, and you've changed it. So it's a bit of a balance.
The same philosophy applies within our industry in hotels. You've got to have that constant involvement of menus. You've got to keep it fresh, and you've got to be focused on the quality and consistency. And we often have a view, certainly in hotels, that when it comes to a food menu, rather than having an extensive food menu where when you read it you're confused and you're not sure what you want to select, have 6 great entrees, 6 great mains and 6 great desserts, and do those exceptionally well rather than having a menu full of 30 or 40 items that you do average. So I think once you've got that consistency and quality right, you then start to animate the experience. And then that's where the service element comes in, and you get your chefs out on the floor and you start to be a little bit more experimental, a bit more confident about the service that you provide, and that gives that extra stimulation for guests to want to keep coming back to that particular outlet or restaurant or bar.
Now, I went to a restaurant some time ago in Asia. It was a steak restaurant, and I was really surprised. Once we'd ordered our steaks, they brought this box of knives, and they all had different handles and slightly different blades. And you actually went through the process of saying, well, that's the knife I'd like to use. So it was a surprise. It was very interesting. I've talked to a lot of people about it. I've since heard other restaurants have done that. So they're the sorts of things that you can do. Yes, thank you.
My name is Carlene. My question is about staffing. So given that recent researchers or studies say that the new generation of employees, particularly in hospitality, are more concerned about work-life balance and faster career development. So what are the key opportunities and challenges that you see for the new generation of employees in the coming years?
I'll start this one
Thank
off.
you.
And we're finding that absolutely prevalent in the industry now, certainly in catering side of the business. For me, as a word of advice to people coming through, for the first 8 years of your life, you should be dedicating yourself to hard bloody work. and that's really what it comes down to, because after you get past your 8th year, now you're entitled to then start moving through the ranks. So for the first 8 years, you should have in your mind that you'll be doing a lot of hard work, doing the tasks you probably don't want to do, because in our time coming through the industry, I did things that I did not want to do, but I knew that in the future that would set me up to become a general manager, to become a group general manager, to be running a big catering business, like I'm doing at the moment. So the advice that I give to a lot of our, generations coming through now, guys, do the hard work, because it'll then set you in the position to where you really want to be to. And I know it's want everything now, part of the industry at the moment, but it's really important to actually then keep that going and then having something to look forward to.
And I would also add to that is take the opportunity to learn from the experience of these gentlemen by asking some questions. Wayne.
Oh, listen, I think Andreas has covered it off perfectly, and I agree with that. And I think I always say that you need to learn to walk before you run. And as an employer in the industry, I'm certainly looking for that depth of experience. The engagement and the confidence is one thing, but your experience and having put in those hard yards initially will put you in great stead when you're in a leadership role and you're challenged and you're confronted with a high volume business, and both of us play a part in that now, is that you'll make a lot better decisions having experienced all facets of a business than you will trying to fast track your career.
Thank you. Certainly.
So given that, so what about the attraction and loyalty of the new generation? How do you face the challenge of a high rate of staff turnover for this kind of generation?
The turnover will always continue to be a challenge, particularly in food and beverage. It's quite transient. We often find as well, those travellers, so backpackers coming through, are generally good. Whilst they're only on short-term contracts, they provide you with 6 months of hard work. They're committed, they're well experienced, they're worldly people who've got a good understanding of what happens in most hotel environments or restaurants and bars. And there's that willingness and desire to be a part of a team environment, because that's what they're looking for. But in terms of overall, I think it's just that pure, that willingness and dedication and desire will take you a long way.
Thank you. And another follow-up? Thank you. Microphone.
I'm Sarah, and I have a question regarding the in-room services and dining. In-room service dining. How's the revenue regarding that? And do you prefer marketing in-room dining? And do you have different menus in different standard of rooms?
Complexes of in-room dining.
In-room dining is always challenging. It's not highly profitable. It's our preference to capture you within our restaurants. However, for our corporate markets, our corporate travellers, they're generally time poor. They've got to work whilst they're in their rooms, so they need to have as good a dining experience in their room as what they could have if they went down to the restaurant. So it's about having, the a la carte offering that we would have in the restaurant available to them in room, whilst we can have, a fairly simplified menu offering as well. And it's about getting that to in a timely fashion, maintaining that quality, and being able to offer, if there's anything over and above, have that flexibility to be able to provide it.
Yeah, generally speaking, it's probably the food and beverage service that attracts the most complaints. That's generally the history of it. And a lot of hotels have gone into a mode of pricing it up, making a poorer offering to drive you downstairs. But it's probably swinging back the other way as well. Another question from somebody. Thank you very much. Your name is?
My name is Maria.
Maria.
Good afternoon. My question is that we are all actually the students of this university, and some of us coming from the developing countries. Let's say in order to get here, let's say in Australia, for example, to get the international experience and maybe to implement this experience to our countries. And then my question is, what you can highlight? Is it, we know that in Australia it's very high level of service and offers what you offer to customers. And what you can highlight? Is it more the basic knowledge, what we have to learn, or it's mostly attitude to the work? I mean, that's to which part we can pay the more attention, or maybe it's the combination of these two parts. Yeah.
I think, if you like me to start, yeah. I think basic knowledge is important. You need to have an understanding of our industry and how we operate. However, in terms of recruitment, my philosophy is hire for attitude, train for skills. So if you have the right attitude and you're confident in your ability and you back your ability, we can teach you what you need to know within the hotel environment. Because we've got a lot of qualified, a lot of experienced people that can train you the ways, but having that basic knowledge going in certainly helps and puts you in a better position because you have a broader understanding of why we do what we do within our industry.
Yeah, I can probably add to that too. So certainly for our business is, up until about 3 years ago, we would hire directly on the skills. So if you could carry 3 plates or you could carry, pour a beer, we would hire pretty much most of the people that could actually do that. And I think over time we've now found that we've developed some very good in-house training programs. And this probably answers some of those questions about retention as well, as we find that we've kept a lot of those employees coming through because we have some really robust training processes in place. Now, that's our way of how we want things done within our venues. So for us, though, it's about the attitude first, and we'll have, and like Wayne said, it's about having some general knowledge. So you have to have an idea of, what the hospitality industry is, or the restaurants are, or hotels, or whatever it may be. But we then primarily look at the attitude of that person, and we look at what their capability could actually be. And then we'll put them into those training programs and take them through. And then by the end of it, because it's easier to train on skills than it is to, change your attitude to the way that you actually approach guests and likewise, other employees and management within the business. So for us, attitude first, skills second.
And I think in terms of hotels, if I can add something, it's understanding how all the departments are linked and how they all affect one another. Yes, food and beverage is different to a bed, but it's all interlinked, and if you don't understand how all those departments work to get the whole done, it'll unravel. Another, yes, thank you, sir. Microphone, please. Your name is?
I'm Robin.
Thank you.
Yeah. My question is also about the staff, but it's regarding the outsourcing staff, because we all know banquet and event request many staff. But in Australia, maybe apparently it's go to the outsourcing staff like the Pinnacle or something like that. So I'm just wondering. So if we are the manager, how can we just use the outsourcing staff more wisely and more take the best advantage from the outsourcing staff?
So if you were the manager, how do you best use that? Okay. So how do your managers manage the Pinnacle staff, for instance?
So our business is quite unique in the fact that we have around about on our books, anything up to around about 1,500 staff. On a grand final day, we'll actually have 2,000 staff working. So there's 500 staff that we actually have to get into the building. So obviously we use a lot of the external service to do that. I think what comes down for us, and in a big an event venue like ANZ Stadium, is process is the key, because they have to follow the process, and that's everything from the food safety aspects, it's the evacuation of the building, it's the process on how we actually carry plates. So what we tend to do with a lot of the agencies that we work with, they actually have to go through an online induction to at least then shows each one of those employees before they walk into the building that this is our minimum standard. So when it comes to carrying 3 plates, where it comes to how we carry, wine bottles in a function room, we kind of set their expectations before they actually walk into the building. So when the managers actually then manage them on the day, then they already know whether they've got those skills or not, because they've already gone through that online induction. So.
Do you use much outsourcing?
Only when we've got high volume events in-house, and similarly to the event side. So we immerse all of our agency staff through peopleology, and that's a requirement. We've had a commitment through those agencies, and certainly even our contractors, if it's for housekeeping or various parts of the business, they all now make a commitment. If they work and partner with a core, they commit to immersing them into peopleology, which is our customer service program.
Okay. We were going... Yes, thank you,
Just
Dr.
got
Scott.
2 more questions just from Laura, if I can.
From Laura, we're happy to have
the first one is
questions from
very
Laura.
quick, and I'm sure it can be answered very easily. This is from Hudson, Sean and Diana. They're interested in the new Sofitel that you're currently building over near the convention centre. Now, they wanted to know, is that a new build or is it renovating an existing building?
Yeah, it's a new build. It'll be a 600-room property. It'll have fairly extensive food and beverage facilities. From a meeting space perspective, we're more boardroom style, because essentially they've got the new convention centre at their doorstep. And the owner of that particular property is Jerry Swartz. So he owns the most accommodational rooms within this country. And we actually have a 20% share in the business as well. So it's a bit of a joint venture, but definitely they'll start, the leadership team will commence early next year. And then throughout the course of the year, they'll start recruiting, with hoping for a early 2017 official opening.
And just as an aside, Mr. Schwartz happens to own the Fairmont, just around the corner from the Laura School.
And the second question is from Happy. She says that F&B is a very stressful environment. Can you suggest some strategies on how they can cope with the stress?
Go to rooms division. Yeah, be happy.
Yeah, choose your favourite wine and get friendly with your local wine supplier, and at the end of the day, have a nice glass. Yeah. No, seriously, and it is a stressful environment, and working in food and beverage, you're on your feet a lot of the day. You go through the process, and I think what's worked in my career is that I've always had another outlet to go to, as in I've always had another hobby to do, which has kept me, and people do talk about that work-life balance, and certainly my work is more than what my life is, certainly in this part of my career, but you've got to have an outlet that you can actually go to and actually just download, do whatever you need to do, so which is important.
I might just point out, it might not be known, this gentleman has climbed Mount Everest.
And he's about to do it again.
He's about to do it again. And what was the service like it up there?
My Sherpas had very good service, so they were
pretty
great,
cool reception.
Absolutely.
Now, we intended to close in a few minutes. I've got one last question I'm going to ask everybody, so I'll just go to the floor once, then I'm going to ask my question, and then we're going to thank these gentlemen. Thank you. It always comes at the end. It always comes at the end.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ryan. There has been a great emphasis given on having this collaboration with celebrity chefs, if you say so, and changing the dining experience that can somehow change the perception of the people as with regards hotel restaurants. But well, this is real talk. I just want to ask you guys if you can share with us what are the other things that you are doing to combat the negative notion of people about hotel food, because specifically I'm pointing out there has been a lot of feedbacks regarding hotel food, specifically like the price is not justified by the quality of the food that they are getting. So if you can share with us some of the things you've done or about to do, that will be highly appreciated.
Not sure they'll share all their secrets, but we'll see.
It's only a couple,
yes,
or
yes,
just
okay.
only a few.
I think from a cost perspective, we've always been a very cost-focused business, hotels. And I think now with the focus on revenue generation and driving innovation, the cost is important, but it's come secondary. It's all about driving revenue. And the innovation piece around food, because we're exposed and you see what reality TV's brought to the forefront, is that celebrity chefs will take risks and they'll be experimental, and it's very much around the produce that they use. And I think the one thing that our chefs have learnt very quickly from being mentored by celebrity chefs is that it's about regionality, it's about using local producers, it's about the freshness of the food and the quality, but ensuring that they're not outpricing themselves in the marketplace. So one thing we can learn from hotels is not outprice ourselves, because we're in, if I looked at Sofitel Sydney, within close proximity we've got Rockpool, we've got Spice Temple, we've got Cafe Sydney, we've got Grosvenor Table, we've got Bridge Room, we've got a number of some of the Sydney's best restaurants. And their price point in some instances is high, but it's quite reasonable for the experience that you're receiving. And it's generally 9 times out of 10 you'll go there, you'll get a great quality experience. Whereas in a hotel, we find it challenging to maintain that consistency in the experience. So we've got to get the experience right, we've got to focus on what we do great within this country from a local and a regional perspective, and we need to learn from the experts in the industry, and I think we'll be in a better position.
If I can just pick up from Wayne's comment, I think the key thing for us there is experimental. And I think, certainly in my hotel background, back in the old days, we weren't very experimental. It was very static. It was a formula that was done for, hundreds of years in hotels. And I think, certainly across, the food and beverage range, that experimental. And one great example at the moment, literally 2 days ago, I had, our exec chef, and we're down in the main production kitchen, and we're actually cooking insects. Is insects going to be a little snack that we could actually put into some of our healthy food outlets, which is an environmentally friendly and sustainable product? Is that going to be something that we can implement into, and it actually becomes an experiment that that people actually be eating insects rather than chips, at a stadium game or in one of the restaurants. So to be experimental, I think is a really key point, and you need to stick your neck out, because at some point, it's not going to work every single time, but you've got to be able to dip your toe in the water. Otherwise, you'll just stay stagnant and you'll never move forward. So.
Are you going to have insects?
Well, can I tell you, they actually tasted really good. We cooked a variety of them, and we had them from a sustainable supplier, and they brought them in and they showed us how to cook them and do all those types of aspects to it. And to be honest with you, you wouldn't have known if you just closed your eyes and put it in and eaten it up. It was no different to eating a potato crisp or something. So that was good. It was interesting.
All right, a final question from me to both gentlemen. We've talked a lot about ambience. We've talked a lot about the food that your customers require and you serve, etc., etc., etc. If you could briefly tell us, what's your favourite meal, where and why?
Oh, listen, it's probably a staple for me, and it's spaghetti bolognese. It's just one of those dishes that it's filling. I've got an Italian background, so it's important to my family, and I grew up having it. And I think it's one of those dishes, particularly when you travel, you always look forward to having it.
Okay. Anywhere in particular, or home, or is there a particular restaurant?
I have to give...
Sofitel, of course.
Sofitel, of course, yeah. Sofitel aside. I've grown up. My sister married into an Italian family, and Nonna by far makes the best. She actually makes the bolognese sauce from the base, and it's outstanding.
Sounds good to me.
It's funny how traditions run in families. So for me, coming from a European background, mine has to be a beautiful veal schnitzel. And obviously you have to go to Vienna to actually have the best Vienna schnitzel. So without question, my favourite dish.
We've gone to Europe for dinner.
Absolutely.
We're just going to close now, so thank you very much.